Welcome, everybody, to Survive and Advance on the Gruely Truth Sports Network. Survive and Advance is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. To find out more about MyBookie.ag, go to thegruelytruth.com, click on the banner at the top of the page, and you can get up to 100% cash bonus on your first $300, up to $300 deposit. I am your co-host for Survive and Advance, Mike Goodpaster, and right now, let me welcome in a man who spent his day watching Talladega and then a Game of Thrones last night, and he is hoping to go see the Avengers movie, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
Well, first off, I'm not going to go see the Avengers movie. It's a 3-hour movie, and I'll wait for it to come out on pay-per-view and watch it there. Secondly, I am thrilled to death because my boy Chase Elliott won the Talladega 500 yesterday, so that's a great win for me. And the F1 race was
Actually,
also very
it's a great
good.
win for Chase.
It's a great win for Chase.
Okay, it's not for you, it's for Chase. Not everything's got to be all about you, Grizzly.
His dad was a hero at Talladega and has the highest average qualifying speed of 212 miles an hour at Talladega, and he comes in, and every time an Elliott wins a race, they ring the horse, they sound the siren in Dawsonville, Georgia, and it got rang yesterday, or the horn, whatever it is you do, it blew. I don't know. And this wraps up NFL football for us, which, while I'm going to miss it, we need a break from NFL football.
No, it doesn't, because now we bring in probably my favorite guest. He's in the top 20 at least. For the FF Face-Off, which you can hear on thegruelingtruth.com. It was actually just posted this morning. Anthony Cervino. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
All right, so the NFL draft is over. 500,000 people were in Tennessee to watch it, which tells you 500,000 people had absolutely nothing to do this weekend and no lives. So let's just start off from the top, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. We're going to break down each team. The Arizona Cardinals, we got to give them a grade, and they started off with Kyler Murray first overall. He has superstar potential. They traded Josh Rosen. To me, when I look at this, the thing that stands out the most, Anthony, is Hakeem Butler. I think it was their best choice this entire draft because I think this kid's going to be a stud.
You know, there's mixed feelings on Hakeem Butler. Some think he should have went a lot higher, and then he ultimately fell to the Cardinals. And they also drafted another wide receiver, actually 2 more wide receivers.
Yeah, Andy Isabella.
Yeah, and I think another one even later than that. They have Christian Kirk, who was entering his second year. He looked really good last year. And they have Larry Fitzgerald, who's on his way out. Excuse me, I think either, lost my train of thought, Isabella or Hakeem Butler, one of those 2 players are going to have a significant role this year. And I think it's anyone's to win.
But when I look at this, Steve, the thing that stands out to me is you get a rookie quarterback, your offensive line's not very good, and you wait until a day 3 pick of Lamont Galliard, who actually is a solid center from Georgia. I think he's a good pickup. But this team, I know they've got a ton of weapons for him, but without offensive line, is it going to matter?
Well, I mean, Kyler Murray, you know, he's got the ability to scramble and run. He's going to be able to protect himself. I probably would have put a little more stock if I'm going to invest that heavily in a quarterback. I probably would have tried to put a little more stock in an offensive line. But overall, I think their draft went pretty good for him. I mean, if you're a Kyler Murray fan, which I'm not sure I'm a Kyler Murray fan yet, but yeah, I may have shored up my offensive line a little bit more to give this kid a little bit more time because he's basically going to have to start because they got rid of Rosen. So he's their heir apparent starting quarterback right now, and he's going to learn baptism under fire.
All right, so if we have to go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say, just on that point, they say Kyler Murray didn't get hit a lot in college. He had one of the best offensive lines in the nation, and he's going to go to a Cardinals team that doesn't have an offensive line. If this kid hasn't been hit and they're going to throw him in the NFL with grown men hitting him, that's going to be a problem. Which is why I think they should have kept Rosen.
Well, I don't think you can keep Rosen if you've got Murray. I don't think you can have them both in the same quarterback room. One is a first-round pick last year, and one is a first-round pick this year, Anthony. I think that would have been a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I get it, but I don't know. I just don't see Steve Keim holding on to his job in 2 years.
Well, actually, he probably should have lost his job as soon as they got rid of the quarterback that they picked last year and the head coach that they picked last year. But when I grade this draft, I see most people giving him at least a B. I'm going to call it a C plus because I think the offensive line should have been addressed a lot sooner. Anthony, what kind of grade do you give him?
I would probably give them a B minus. I don't hate the draft because they put players. They took players that will help out Cliff Kingsbury's philosophy with the air raid, and you need the personnel. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head by not addressing the offensive line.
All right, Steve, give him a grade.
I would go with a C plus. Kyler Murray, he's the Heisman winner and a great player, but he's unproven, and I'm not a big fan of that style of quarterback play. I'm more of a Andrew Luck drop back, stay in the pocket, pass.
He does stay in the pocket,
and yeah, I guess so. But I agree with you. I don't know that I would have dumped Josh Rosen. What did they get for Josh Rosen?
That Isabella kid, the wide receiver from Massachusetts.
Okay.
Second round pick.
Yeah.
Second round pick. Was that a good move? I mean, you take your first round pick from last year, you invested in giving 12 months, and then you dump him for a second round pick. Was that a good move?
Well, they did the same thing with their head coach, so it just tells you that whoever is doing this is screwing it up. But the problem is, it would be different, Anthony, if they would have got a new GM, and a new GM would have came in and hired a head coach and a quarterback. This is an entirely different thing, and usually if you're rotten from the head, the body's going to die too.
So they got Hakeem Butler for him, right?
Well, I think the pick they got for Rosen this year was from the Dolphins.
Isabella.
Yeah, and it ended up being Massachusetts wide receiver Andy Isabella. But the good thing is, we probably won't talk about the Cardinals much this year on their NFL shows.
No.
But they do have cool uniforms. I always like those helmets.
See, I think we're going to talk a lot about the Cardinals because all of these moves they're making are media friendly and storyline friendly. And I think that's why they're making the moves they are, because they know they're in a small market. They know that when certain teams go to Arizona to play, that it's a home game for their opponent. And I think these are moves to put asses in the seats.
Yeah, but the problem is, asses aren't going to be in the seat when you're 1-8, 9 games into the season.
Oh, they'll deal with that at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll sign Johnny Manziel to come in and take over then. All right, the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons in this draft clearly viewed the offensive line as a priority. They used the number 14th pick on Chris Lindstrom, then traded back into the first round to take right tackle Caleb McGarry. I think Lindstrom's a great pick. I think McGarry was a reach. On day 3, I think they added depth at the cornerback position. They got a pass rusher in John Kaminsky. I think they needed a defensive tackle, which I think is the team's biggest need. That went undressed. So when I look at this draft, I would give them a C. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I wasn't too big on their draft either. I think they had other needs that they had to fill.
Yeah, the thing that would have made more sense to me, Steve, was taking Lindstrom at 14 and then taking a big defensive tackle at 31.
Yeah, they had kind of a mediocre draft. It's kind of nothing really spectacular either way around, and I don't think that, like you said, they didn't meet all their needs. I don't know if they were getting in a situation where they're starting to take the best player available at some point in time or what, but kind of a real uneventful draft for them. It seemed like I didn't hear a lot of chatter about their draft picks or anything spectacular happening. They could have gotten Lindstrom probably a little bit later, do you think, other than the 14th pick? Could have maybe got him the next time down. I don't know if he would have stayed that long.
I don't know. I think that's probably a 50-50 shot. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah.
They probably could have gotten him later.
Yeah, but what I would have been worried about...
traded down and taken him in the 20s or something.
Because I think Lindstrom's a guy that a team like the Texans may have jumped on right away instead of going with a developmental tackle.
Lindstrom's going to be a starter in this league and for the Falcons for a long time. I think they came back and got another offensive lineman at the end of the first, and Caleb McGarry. And I said
Gary,
this on our reaction show initially from the first round, that I think the Falcons know that they can make a run. They do have the pieces, and they could have drafted best available or basically luxury picks. And knowing that Matt Ryan is in the back end of his career, he's at the end of his prime. They need to strike now. And the one thing that I saw last year that you can't really blame on injuries was they couldn't run the ball. Even with Tevin Coleman and Ito Smith, I know they lost Devonta Freeman for the year, but Tevin Coleman's a capable running back. He couldn't get out of his own way, and they had to address the interior offensive line.
All right, so what kind of grade do you guys give the Falcons? Almost forgot who the hell we were talking about. We got Steve. Falcons grade.
I got a B minus, and only because of this. Because they took offensive linemen with their first 2 picks. At least they had a purpose. If you're going to take your first 2 picks, you're going to get an offensive guard and an offensive tackle. It shows me you went into it with a process, and you picked something that you needed to work on. You just weren't all over the map. Whether we think that's the right thing they needed to do, that's our.
Well, I think it's all right. I just think they took the wrong tackle.
Okay. Well, I'm not as good in personnel as you guys are on that, but I see that their first 2 picks were offensive linemen. That means they went into it with a mentality of, we got to get something fixed. Let's just work on the offensive line right now and get Ryan some more time. And then we'll get a couple receivers down the road, because receivers and cornerbacks are big in the second round, and we can pick them up there. So they seem to have a purpose to shore up their offense. They didn't seem to put a lot of effort into their defense, which we all seem to think they needed to do. But I'm going to go with a B minus.
All right, Anthony.
I would give them a B plus. I would have liked it a little bit more if they would have dressed the interior defensive line. They could have traded up to get an Ed Oliver or a Wilkins, and they didn't. So that's, I would have given him an A if it wasn't for that. Instead, they didn't draft any defensive tackle.
All right, next up, we got the Baltimore Ravens. And the Ravens are a team I actually kind of like what they did. They took Marquise Brown, who I think could possibly be the best receiver in this draft. They also picked up Miles Boykin from Notre Dame. They added Justice Hill, who I think is a nice complement with Mark Ingram. And since this is the Ravens, you know that they're going to address the defense. Defensive end Jalen Ferguson at the 85th pick. Nose tackle Dalen Mack at 160. In between, they picked up Oklahoma guard Ben Powers. And then finally, Trace McSorley is a solid backup quarterback. But the great thing about McSorley is similar to Jackson a little bit, so you don't have to change the defense or the offense that much if something happens to him. I like what the Ravens did here. I would give them a B plus, Anthony.
Yeah, the Ravens had a really good draft. One of my favorite players that they took was Justice Hill, the running back. He's a player in fantasy football I'm going to be looking at because he is entering a really good situation. Mark Ingram's 29 years old. Gus Edwards is a one-dimensional player. He's really an empty in the passing game. And if you want to think about what Mark Ingram's role was with the Saints, and they had Alvin Kamara, I think Justice Hill is going to be that Alvin Kamara for a Ravens team who has a quarterback that struggles to throw the football downfield. I think Justice Hill, if he can improve on his pass protection, will have a big role in passing situations and on third downs.
All right, what kind of grade do you give him?
I'm going to give them an A.
All right, I will refuse to give Baltimore Ravens an A on anything, so I'm a B plus. Steve, what do you think, Ravens?
I think A. I think they had a good draft.
All right, next up, the Buffalo Bills. That was simple, Steve. The Buffalo Bills, when you look at they did, some questionable picks in the top 8 caused Ed Oliver to drop into Buffalo's waiting hands. He's a 3-technique defensive tackle, one of the Bills' big needs. Then they maneuvered. They took Cody Ford, who I think can play guard or tackle. Deshaun Knox at 96 wasn't a bad consolation for missing on the early tight ends. He needs to be developed, but I think he has starter potential in the next 2 or 3 years. Running back Devin Singletary gives the Bills a solid player if this is LaShawn McCoy's last season in Buffalo. I don't see a wide receiver here. I think they needed a wide receiver, especially for Josh Allen. But I think this is a solid draft. I would give it a B, Anthony.
Um, I don't think they needed a wide receiver because they brought a couple in free agency, including a Cole Beasley and a John Brown, and they had they still have Zay Jones and Robert Foster. I didn't think that was an immediate need. I would have loved to see them take a tight end early, but instead they went for Ed Oliver and Cody Ford, which are probably safer picks. Devin Singletary could be a player on this offense. I think the Bills are in play to possibly trade McCoy before the season or by the trade deadline, because you have to remember they also brought in TJ Yeldon. Ed Oliver makes their defensive front seven really dangerous. They were already pretty good, and I think he just bolsters it even more. And Cody Ford was a necessary pick in the second round. You talked about getting Josh Allen some weapons. Josh Allen ran for his life last year, was very productive running the football, but he's a quarterback, and you need to protect him.
All right, Steve?
I think I would say A-. I think they had a good draft. I think the best move for them was trading up to get Cody Ford. I mean, they only gave up, I think a fifth-round pick to move up to get him. And I think that's he's a solid player. He may be the best pick they got overall. Ed Oliver's expected, but Cody Ford may be the gem they got at number 38 as an offensive tackle. He seems to have good credentials, so I would say an A- for Buffalo. I think it's a good draft for them.
All right, I call it a B. I still think Ed Oliver is going to be a bust. I'm the only person in the world that thinks that, but we'll see. The Carolina Panthers next. They knew what they needed, and they got it. They started in the first round with edge rusher Brian Burns at number 16, pure speed off the edge. They jumped up to 37 in the second round to take Ole Miss left tackle Greg Little. That trade up was pretty costly, though, as Little is a player with immense talent, but his play is extremely inconsistent. They also took West Virginia quarterback Will Grier at number 100. I see a lot of people grade this as like a B+. I would give the Carolina Panthers a D- on this draft, Anthony.
You really think it was that bad?
I
mean, they picked up Brian Burns, an edge rusher that they needed.
Oh, come on. He's an edge rusher that doesn't use his hands.
Line, a tackle, which they needed.
A horrible tackle.
They got a backup quarterback because Cam isn't getting any younger.
Yeah. I mean, just because they got a certain position. I mean,
close to an A.
Dude, Brian Burns is an average player. He's not the 16th player in the draft. Greg Little is terrible. He will fit in with their offensive line because they suck. Will Grier's arm strength is crap, and we all know this. Cam Newton's going to have to lose both of his legs before they ever replace him in Carolina. Steve?
I would say probably a B+.
I don't think it was terrible. I think they drafted for need and they got it.
Yeah. Well, Brian Burns and Greg Little are two guys that nobody needs, especially Greg Little. Greg Little is terrible, Anthony. Or as Charles Barkley would say, he's terrible.
Horrible.
He's terrible. All right. The Chicago Bears got rid of Jordan Howard and replaced him with a similar player stylistically in David Montgomery at number 73. The Bears had to get a wide receiver. They got a good one, I think, in Riley Riddle at 126. Riley Ridley, yeah, Riddle, the Riddler. Right. There's not a whole lot here. 7th round pick, Stephen Denmark, or Stefan, whatever the hell he calls it, but Stephen Denmark, I think, is going to be a hell of a football player. I would give the Bears a C+, and the way they traded out of everything, we'll give it a B- because I think Montgomery's solid. I think Ridley's a good player, and I think Denmark could be one of the steals of the draft, Anthony.
Yeah, they definitely needed to replenish cornerback. I know that Brian Callahan followed Vic Fangio over to Denver, and he's a player that can develop into a decent slot corner, right?
Yeah.
Right. As far as other needs, I think they hit the nail on the head with David Montgomery. I think he can do a little bit more than Jordan Howard in the passing game, which is what Nagy wants. Riley Ridley, he's a little bit raw. I think he'll contribute on the outside, especially I'm not in love with Chicago's receivers, especially Taylor Gabriel. He's a very big boomer bust player, and I think Riley Ridley could develop into something there. And reportedly, they like Ridley more than they like Anthony Miller, who they drafted last year in the slot. And Miller was pretty productive, so I'm excited to see what Riley Ridley can do.
Yeah, I think Ridley's one of the top 5 or 6 wide receivers in this draft. What kind of grade do you give him?
A minus.
All right, we got an A minus, a B minus. What do you got, Steve?
I got a B. I think this whole draft for them was predicated on Khalil Mack. They gave up a ton to get him, so this really is.
Yeah, I
like
think when you put that into it, you could call it an A just because they were kind of hamstrung going in, and what they got really good value for what they had. Next up,
exactly.
We go to the Cincinnati Bengals, who took offensive tackle Jonah Williams at number 11 overall. They picked up Drew Sample, which was way too early for him, I think. I think they got a steal in Jermaine Pratt of NC State. And I think Ryan Finley is the steal of this draft. I would give them a B, and I really like the Finley pick, and I think that they made themselves a little bit better in this draft. Jonah Williams, I would rather have Jonah Williams over Devin Bush, especially if you're going to give me Jermaine Pratt in the 3rd round. Anthony?
Yeah, I like what the Bengals did. They had a lot of picks. They filled a lot of needs. You can't go wrong with Jonah Williams at number 11 overall, because if we know one thing about last year's Bengals, when Andy Dalton went down after a strong start, the whole team fell apart. You need to protect him. I don't mind Drew Sample. He's a really good blocking tight end, and there wasn't a lot of him in this draft, and I think he can develop into a receiver. When Tyler Eifert goes down again, even if Sample gets a good month in September, and then if Eifert goes down in October, I think Sample will come in and make a difference in the offense. They needed a linebacker. Jermaine Pratt could start right away for Vontaze Burfict. And Ryan Finley, there were reports saying that they could take a quarterback in the 1st round. I think they were smart not to address quarterback until, day 3? Address other needs. And Ryan Finley, see what you have in him, and at worst, you have a decent backup to Andy Dalton, because I don't think there's anything wrong with Andy Dalton.
No, there's not, but I will tell you this. I think Ryan Finley will last longer in the NFL than 90% of the guys drafted in front of him.
Why did they draft these 2 running backs, Rodney Anderson and Travion Williams? Is it because of Mixon? Is it because Gio Bernard is
No, it's because of Mark Walton. Out? They've only got 2 running backs on the roster.
That's true.
Because Walton got in trouble, and the thing is this. I mean, I think people forget, but Rodney Anderson from Oklahoma was a starter in front of Joe Mixon until he got hurt. He's had 3 seasons. 3 of these 4 seasons were ended by season-ending injuries. But Rodney Anderson is a 1st or 2nd round talent. Trayvon Williams, I've seen mixed reports about him, but I think the kid's a hell of a running back. And if you get a chance to take those 2, at least one of them is going to turn out to be better than what you had with Mark Walton last year.
Yeah, and we didn't see a lot of Mark Walton, not until the end of the year. But yeah, I guess I see it, especially with the Gio Bernard contract thing coming up.
Well, that and Gio's been banged up before, so it gives you a little bit more depth. And they're both very good athletes. None of these guys
are taking any touches out of Joe Mixon's hands, right?
No, Joe Mixon, if this team is run the way it's supposed to be, this will look like the L.A. Rams of the East, and Joe Mixon's going to touch the ball 25 times a game. If they do that, this is a team, if Jonah Williams is starting instead of Bobby Hart, that I think could surprise people and possibly even win what I think is not a very good division.
Well, we share a brain there, and I would take the odds.
Yeah, I mean,
They're 30 to 1 the last time I saw. 30
I took the odds.
1.
I took the odds on my bookie for them to win the AFC North, and this was like 2 weeks ago, and it was 65 to 1.
Wow.
So, what kind of grade did you give them?
I would give the Bengals a B+.
All right, Steve.
I give them an A-. I think Williams, Sample, Pratt, and Finley are all real solid picks for them. They had great first 4-round picks. They got a backup. I agree, a viable backup for Andy Dalton. Williams can play either side of the line. Sample, a block. He's a two tight end that can block and catch passes. And with Eifert, gotta love Eifert. He's a Notre Dame boy, but has he ever played a complete season without being hurt?
Not since he got hurt in the Pro Bowl about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, and then you get a decent linebacker in there in Pratt, so I give him an A-. I think Bengals drafted well.
All right,
they finally got Marv, what's his name, out of there, and maybe it's going to be a turnaround year for you. Maybe the Colts will be a little nervous about playing you this year.
Actually, Steve, I hate to tell you this, but the Bengals beat the Colts last year when Dalton was healthy. All right, the Cleveland Browns started by jumping up.
Luck wasn't healthy.
He wasn't? I could have swore he played that whole game, and he was like 28 from 37. But then he threw up.
Andrew Luck was healthy all season.
I know. Steve always needs
but it doesn't
an
mean
excuse.
he was healthy.
Oh, okay.
No, they brought in Jacoby Brissett to throw a long bomb one time because they didn't want him throwing the ball that hard.
Yeah,
that was early in the season. Okay, I remember. I know.
They brought in Jacoby Brissett to do that about 3/4 of the way through the season, didn't they?
Right. His arm didn't get really healthy until.
This is the way this goes, all right, Anthony? His arm didn't get healthy until they started winning all the time. All right, the Cleveland Browns started by jumping up a few spots at number 46 to take LSU cornerback Greedy Williams, considered by some the best cornerback in this draft, not by me. Took the BYU linebacker, who I can't pronounce his name. They got Mac Wilson, who I think is a good one. I would give this a C, Anthony.
I would probably give the Browns a B. I like Greedy Williams, and paired with the corner that they took last year, the upside is there. They could have the best young cornerback tandem if Greedy Williams plays up to his potential. The Browns didn't have a first-round pick. They brought in a linebacker. They brought in a safety. I think these were all quality picks by the Browns, who really, they didn't need a lot. They're a very talented team, and I think they did good for what they had.
Well, I'm not
because Odell Beckham's part of this draft.
I'm not a big Greedy Williams fan. So, Steve, what do you got for the Browns?
I got a B+ for this. I like teams now that are getting smart here, and it's a couple of teams. They traded out of the first round. If you're not up top picking in the first 5 or 6 spots for one of the marquee players, get out of there.
They got Odell Beckham to trade out of the first round, so.
Yeah, and they got Odell Beckham to get out of it. But I understand you don't think Greedy Williams is the best cornerback, but I think at 46 overall, it's a good pick.
I think he's a cancer.
They
you watch. This team has a bunch of cancers on it, Steve and Anthony. They're not going to be what everybody thinks they're going to be.
But I also like Cleveland because they picked a kicker, Austin Siebert, with the 170th pick. I don't think many kickers got drafted this year, so good for them for picking a kicker.
Two punters got drafted.
That's it?
I know 2 punters. If you're saying this guy's a kicker, then 3 special teams guys.
Yeah, Oklahoma kicker, so I'm assuming he's a kicker, not a PE punter. So, but
I think the Patriots drafted one, and I think the 49ers drafted one in the 4th round.
Yeah.
All right.
But given the fact that they added Odell Beckham to get this, and you got to pretty much put Odell Beckham into this draft. And, there's a superstar for you right there going with, what's his name, the quarterback. Can't think of his name right now.
Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield, yeah. And then I think they got greedy at a good pick, and they're not going to spend a lot of money because they don't have a first-round pick. So I think good draft for them.
All right, Dallas Cowboys. Let's go to the Cowboys. The Cowboys took defensive tackle Tristan Hill, very explosive player. I think this is a great pick, and if I am a Cowboys fan, I feel much better because they didn't take DK Metcalf. They took somebody that can actually help this team. Also, Connor McGovern taking it number 90, I think, makes the offensive line a lot better. Tony Pollard, I think, is a very good player from Memphis. Good return man. He can play running back or he can play in the slot. They were kind of hamstrung, too, with trades. Amari Cooper took some draft picks. I would say this. I'd give it a C+, but it's a C+ that I would give to them with the Tristan Hill and Connor McGovern are going to end up being starters in Dallas even 5 years from now. So those are the 2 players that stood out to me. I think Pollard can help, so I don't think they got a lot to help. But I think with Tristan Hill, they got a stud here, Anthony.
Yeah, and Tristan Hill was their target all along, which leaked out on the NFL Network prior to the draft, that if he was there, they would take him. He does fill a need. If you remember what the Rams did to them, I mean, the Cowboys' run defense was outstanding all season last year, but in that playoff game, it was C.J. Anderson running it down their throats. I think they kept that in mind with this pick. Connor McGovern's a great pick, because last year's second rounder, Connor Williams, hasn't looked the part. He had the starting job that he ended up losing. And just in case he doesn't develop and or Travis Frederick ends up having to retire, I think McGovern's going to end up a starter.
Yeah.
And, that's 2 starters, with your second and third round pick.
Yeah, and Connor Williams is never going to be a good player. You could go back and listen to our draft show last year. I think I made that statement, and I hate everybody, so it works out that usually I'm right. Steve, Dallas Cowboys.
I would say B. I think with Hill and McGovern, they got 2 great picks there, and that you do that. You got to add Amari Cooper into this too. Again, you got to consider him a draft pick, because they trade a first round pick to get him. And Amari Cooper's not a bad player. I mean, the guy can play. Most intriguing to me though is with the 158th and 155th, they took a father-son duo, and Michael Jackson and his dad Joe. I thought they were both dead.
Those are the wrong Jackson family. All right, next up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We got the Denver Broncos, and Denver traded back from number 10 to number 20, and they got Noah Fant, who could be a star in the offense. I still don't like the fact that he doesn't block very well. The other pick they got is they got Dalton Reisner in the second round. He could play right tackle, either guard spot or center. They picked Drew Lock, who I think that some expected in the first round. I think this is a great choice. I don't like Drew Lock. I don't think he's going to be that good. But I think the physical tools are there, that getting him as late as they did and being able to sit him on the bench while Joe Flacco plays without everybody screaming for him to get in the game gives the kid a lot better chance to be able to make this. They picked up Dermonte Jones, which I think is a great pick. I would give them a B+ here, Anthony.
Yeah, I like what the Denver Broncos did. They were one of those smart teams that
I don't like the Reisner row. I think Reisner is way too high. I don't like him.
I think that they didn't, clamor to get their quarterback. Drew Lock has always been their top quarterback, dating back to the combine. I remember that leaked out. And they waited. They traded back. They accumulated more picks. They filled needs. I think Noah Fant is going to be a big player for them because of how Joe Flacco likes to utilize a tight end. I know he can't block, but I don't think they brought him in for that. I think they needed a middle-of-the-field stretcher. And, yeah, Drew Lock doesn't have to play right away. And that's the key. Joe Flacco, you could probably get another 2 years out of. So Lock can sit and wait and develop, unlike, they couldn't do that with Paxton Lynch, who turned out to be, garbage.
Yeah, well, Paxton Lynch was going to be garbage even if they let him wait a couple years. Steve, Denver Broncos.
I'd say B+. I like Noah Fant as a pass catcher. I think Reiser and Locke were good picks for where they got him at. And, I do think Drew Lock can be a future for them. You're right, you're going to have the luxury, hopefully, if Flacco stays healthy, hopefully you don't have to throw him in there right away. Do they have another quarterback on that roster? Any consequence behind Flacco right now?
Drew Lock.
It's Drew Lock. Okay, well, let's hope and Flacco's prone for injury, so they're going to need to ramp him up pretty quickly and get him just be ready. Next man up. But Reisner, good pick, offensive lineman. Shore that up. Fant, not a good blocker, but their first 3 picks were strong, so yeah, I'd say B+.
All right, next up, the Detroit Lions, T.J. Hawkinson. I think that's a great pick. If you're going to pick a tight end in the top 10, you better be sure he's a sure thing. And with his ability to block and catch the ball, I think he is that. I think that they reached on linebacker Jahani Tavai. The rest of their draft is a little nondescript to me, but I do like the Clemson defensive end, Austin Bryant. I would give him a B here, Anthony.
Yeah, I like Hawkinson a lot. He's already expected or already rumored to be the week one starter. And whenever you get a tight end who can block right away, that'll usually get you on the field. We saw the opposite last year with Mike Gesicki, who was a great pass catcher, but he couldn't stay on the field because he really had issues picking up blocking, something that you have to watch with Noah Fant as well. But Hawkinson's going to be a week one starter, and he's going to be a big impact player. From Matt Patricia, who understands the value of a versatile tight end.
All right, Steve, Detroit?
I'd say B. It came down to, I think, that, they passed on Ed Oliver. I know you're not an Ed Oliver fan, but they made a choice here to go offensively or defensively, and they went offense. I think they got a great player in Hawkinson, but I, like you, don't see much of anything here. Austin Bryant at 117. The Clemson defense was one of the strongest in college football last year. So, B, I mean, it's kind of a nondescript draft from other than Hawkinson, really.
All right, the Green Bay Packers. And I've seen a lot of people complain that they didn't really help Aaron Rodgers because they didn't get him a wide receiver. But I think they did help Aaron Rodgers. We'll get to that in a little bit because you got to have defense. Rashawn Gary at number 12. I don't like him. I think the kid's lazy. I don't think he's going to be a very good player. I think it's a wasted pick. I think Darnell Savage at number 21 is a kid that could be an absolute stud. He brings meanness to your defense. And then they did get a pass receiver a little bit in Jay Sternberger, who is a tight end who I think is a very good player. In the second round, they got Elgton Jenkins, who should be a factor at center or guard right away. I would give the Packers a B. And if they would have picked somebody in Rashawn Gary at number 12, I think I probably would have gave him an A, Anthony.
I'm going to give them a B+, maybe a fringe A. I do like Rashawn Gary. I think he brings a meanness and nastiness to that Packers defense that they revamped.
Now, wait a second. How can you be mean and nasty when you're lazy and don't play half the time?
Oh, here we go.
Well, it's not a here we go. I'll be right on this. Just wait. See. You can ask Steve. He's argued with me before.
Then they brought in Darnell Savage, a player that you liked a lot. You had him as a top safety on the board, and that's how he was drafted. I get what you're saying, that people are a little pissed off about not getting Aaron Rodgers' weapons, but they still have Jimmy Graham. They still have, they drafted 3 wide receivers last year. They drafted 3 running backs the year before that. They have Devontae Adams.
Well, my point is this. They got him the weapons he needed by getting some defensive players and some offensive linemen.
Yeah, and I think they'll be fine. I like the draft for the Packers. They got better.
All right, Steve, Packers.
What are Rashawn Gary's off-field business interests?
I don't know. I just know that I watch a lot of Big Ten football, and sometimes he just didn't show up to play. Other times he looked like a great player.
I'm reading Gary's production wasn't what you would have liked at Michigan, and his off-field business interest turned off some teams.
I don't know. So, maybe he owns a strip club, Steve. I don't know.
It's not a bad gig. They make a lot of money in those things. So, yeah, I know you like Savage a lot, and I think that's worth the pick right there. Because I know you're high on him, and he's a great kid from what you say, but he's a beast on the field, and that's kind of what a franchise like the Packers want to represent. Gary at number 12, if he's got some concerns about his, production and you're concerned about his laziness, number 12 pick for somebody who's got some questions. I'll go B+ on this one.
All right, next up, the Houston Texans, who I think probably had to be sick to their stomach when the Eagles jumped up and took Andre Dillard right in front of them. They settled for Titus Howard of Alabama State, who I think most people thought was a second or third round pick. They then took Northern Illinois tackle Max Sharping in the second round. So the one thing you say about them is they knew what their problem was, and they're trying to fill that immediately with the offensive line. My thing is this. I'm not a huge fan of Howard or Sharping. I think they are both guys that could develop into being good. But, Anthony, when I look at this team, this was a playoff team last year that was missing offensive linemen. With offensive linemen, they win. I don't think by any means Howard or Sharping, either one, is a plug-and-play offensive lineman. So I don't know how much they helped themselves for this coming year immediately. I'd give them a C.
Yeah, I think they're more developmental offensive linemen myself, and I would probably give them a C as well.
Steve?
I'd go with C. Thank God.
All right, next up
We're
we
gonna
get the
play him twice a
Indianapolis
year.
Colts. This is for Steve. His first pick, physical corner Rock Ya-Sin, was thought to be a first-rounder by a lot of people. When you look at this, they picked up Paris Campbell, who I do think is a really good one. I think overall they drafted well. I think the only mistake here was they didn't take a defensive tackle at some point. But overall, I would give them a B, B minus. Steve, I'll let you go first since it's your team.
I think they met their needs for what they wanted. And they admittedly so that they need to shore up their defense. You know, Ballard says right away, you know, we didn't get what we needed defensively, but we filled other noise. They took some good, strong corners. You know, E.J. Speed has gotten a lot of high linebacker at the number 164 pick. They took an edge in Jerry Green, but I don't know much about him. And late in the round, they picked up a backup offensive tackle. So I think they met their needs. You know, I'm a little biased, but I'm going to go with an A- here with the Colts.
Jeez.
Paris Campbell, I think, was a good pick, and Rock Ya-Sin. I also like the fact, again, that the Colts, you know, without necessarily, they dropped out of the first round. And, again, they're not going to spend that first-round money on their first-round pick. They're going to give him second-round money, and that just, you know, keeps their salary cap intact. So when they have the opportunity to buy some players, you know, they're going to have a big bank account to do that. And I don't think the Colts are done strengthening up their team, and I still think they're the team to beat in the AFC South.
All right, an A.
So I give them an A-.
An A. I don't think I've given anybody an A, have I?
You're giving them an A?
I haven't given anybody an A. I'm giving them a B minus. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, see, my issue with the Colts is I think they needed a run-stuffing defensive tackle.
Yeah.
And they didn't really go there. The cornerback, I like him a lot. Good value in the second. They brought in an outside linebacker. I don't know if that was a need. Paris Campbell, you know, they signed Devin Funchess. You have a couple of rookies who got hurt last year coming in for their year two. They got another linebacker at pick 89. Where is the defensive tackle that they needed? I feel like they went everywhere but there, and that's why I'm not going to give them an A. I'll give them a B+. I like what they did, but the biggest need, they didn't fill.
Yeah, and you got to be able to stop the run to win in the playoffs, and that's what cost them last year.
And that's a weakness for the Colts. That's definitely a weakness for the Colts. I mean, we got blistered on that first wave of defense and relied too much on our linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties making tackles, and you don't want to do that.
All right.
That gives you, it's critical. So
next up, I'll go with my favorite in the AFC South, maybe, the Jacksonville Jaguars, because they got Nick Foles, and he always wins. They got Josh Allen, who kind of fell in their lap, which is an outstanding pickup for them. They got Juwan Taylor with the 35th pick. And the interesting thing here is a lot of people thought the Jaguars were going to take Juwan Taylor with the 7th. So they end up getting Juwan Taylor, the guy a lot of people thought they wanted. Plus they get Josh Allen. I'm not 100% sold on Taylor, but I think with a good coach, I think he's going to be a really good player. They got a nice pick at San Jose State's Josh Oliver. Temple running back Raquel Armstead, I think is a really good player. Quincy Williams at number 98 is a speedy linebacker who kind of a safety hybrid, which fits what the Jaguars do. I'm going to give the Jaguars an A minus, Anthony.
Yeah, the Jaguars, they pretty much got best player available everywhere. They were projected to take Juwan Taylor where they took Josh Allen, who wasn't even expected to be there. This draft reminds me of what the Jaguars did in 2016 when they drafted Jalen Ramsey and then Miles Jack, because Miles Jack, if you remember, was a projected top 5 pick, and then he had the injuries and fell. And this is similar to where they got 2 top 10 talents and in the first and second round. So I give them an A+.
All right. Steve?
I'll give him an A-. I think you got to throw Nick Foles into this again, too. You look at the overall way
he's a free agent.
They strengthened this. Well, but still, he's an addition to the team.
Yeah.
They strengthened their team through the draft and through the acquisition of Nick Foles. So I think the Jacksonville Jaguars maybe got as good or better than any team in the AFC South right now. They may have made the biggest leap in terms strengthening up their team with through the draft and through free agency. So I'm going to give them an A minus.
All right, next up, the Kansas City Chiefs, who I'm sure scoured all the state penitentiaries to try to find somebody to, like to beat up on women, but I don't think they found them this time. They took Georgia wide receiver McCall Hardman. He's basically a pure speed guy. Possible replacement for Tyreek Hill. He's not going to be, though. And I can't believe that they took Hardman instead of Paris Campbell, who I think would have been a safer, better pick. They did get Juan Thornhill, which I thought was a great move. Overall, I'll give the Chiefs an F. What about you, Steve?
An F?
Yeah, an F. I think it sucked.
I mean, you go ahead, Steve. You go first.
I had him as about a B minus. Hardman seemed to be a good player. Thornhill was solid. I think they met their needs from what they wanted, but I don't know about an F. But I would say probably a B minus.
I can't see how you could give him above a C. I mean, Thornhill's a good player. I don't think they got anything else. I think you got Kalen Saunders, who could be decent. He's a great athlete for a defensive tackle. But
here, with this draft, you got Frank Clark because they shipped their first-round pick to Seattle for Clark. Mecole Hardman's a pure speed player. He's excellent in the return game, excellent in open field. The one knock on Hardman is the fact that he's only played wide receiver for 2 years.
Yeah, and he don't run real good routes, which is another problem.
Tyreek Hill wasn't the prototypical wide receiver either, but he fit what Andy Reid wants to do. I kind of like Mecole Hardman and understand that they do want to replace Tyreek Hill. Who's probably going to be cut. More news on Tyreek Hill. Let me interject with this, that the NFL could ultimately put him on the commissioner's exempt list as soon as this week. Thornhill, pretty good defensive back. I think he could be a role player in year one, and with the rest of their draft, they didn't have a lot of picks.
All right.
The other thing, too, they had to be careful because Mahomes' rookie contract's due to expire. That guy's going to collect some big jack. He maybe end up being the highest paid player in the NFL, surpassing Russell Wilson here real quick. And they needed cap money, so, I think they had to take that into consideration in their draft picks, too.
All right, next up, we got the Los Angeles Chargers, and they pick up Jerry Tillery. I think it's one of the best value system fits if they can keep him out of trouble. They got Nasir Adderley, who actually was the guy I thought was the number one safety. I had Savage at number 2. I just said I would take Savage 1 because he had a cool name and he likes to hit people. They got Trey Pipkins, who's a developmental player. Notre Dame linebacker Drew Tranquil, I think is a very good pick. Easton Stick, decent backup quarterback. I'd give him a B. What about you, Anthony?
What team are we on? I'm sorry.
Chargers,
yes. I actually do like their draft. I would probably give them a B+. They address needs on both sides of the football. They were another team that could have drafted best available player. I would have liked them to add a wide receiver because I don't trust the injury history and dependability of what they have right now. But other than that, I think they had a really strong draft.
Steve?
I agree. I would like to see them get another receiver, but I give him a B+. I think, like you said, Tillery seems to be a beast if you can keep him out of trouble. And, maybe that was just college. The atmosphere in college is different. It's a little more business-like in the NFL, and let's see if he settles down and, doesn't have to worry about taking tests and flunking tests or going to keggers all night long, things like that. Let's see. But I give him a B+. But I would like to see him take a receiver.
All right, next up we got the Los Angeles Rams, who finally got on the clock at number 61 after trading down multiple times. Got safety Taylor Rapp. He could be a replacement for Mark Barron at a fraction of the price. Darrell Henderson, David Long. I would give this a C-. I think this is a draft that will maybe give them a little bit more depth, but I don't see anything here really that stands out, Anthony.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to probably give them a C plus. Two of their biggest needs was interior offensive line, even exterior offensive line, and interior defensive line, and they didn't address any of that until the middle of the draft, until day 3. The players that they picked up, Taylor Rapp, Darrell Henderson, David Long, they didn't really they have players to play that this year, and this is a Rams team that needs to be thinking about win now, while Todd Gurley still has his knee intact, and that's even in question. I don't know if these players are helping them win now or in 2020, 2021. I think they should have taken offensive line and defensive line earlier in the draft. As far as the talent that they picked up, I like Darrell Henderson a lot. I think they had the running back in Malcolm Brown on the roster to take the pressure off of Todd Gurley, where they didn't have to go at Henderson that early.
All right, Steve.
I give them a C plus. I don't think they did anything to strengthen their team, like you said right now. I don't know if they're just putting some depth in place and they're comfortable with what they've got. But I tend to agree that this is a team that needs to win right now because of Gurley. How long is he going to last? He's taking a pounding left and right. But they seem to just put depth into their lineup and nothing, no addition that's going to improve their starting lineup right now.
All right, next up, we got the Miami Dolphins, who I think fleeced the Cardinals. First, Miami dropped from 48 to 62. Then it used the 67th pick to trade for quarterback Josh Rosen. I don't like Rosen, but it's a potential franchise quarterback. And if he's not, which I don't think he is, he's cheap, and the Dolphins can move on easily here. They picked up Christian Wilkins, who I think was a great pick, solid player. Guard Michael Dieter, who was a 4-year starter at Wisconsin, I think is a great pick. I think Myles Gaskin will make this roster, who was Miami's last pick. I'll give the Dolphins a B plus here, Anthony.
Yeah, I would probably give them a solid B plus. They had a solid draft, and I think that's how I would sum it up. You're a team in rebuild. You're a team with a defensive coordinator that comes from New England, and they want to build from the ground up inside the trenches, and you can't miss on these first-round picks. So they went a little bit safer. They didn't want to reach on anybody, and they got their quarterback. And they got their quarterback in Josh Rosen, who was a first-round pick last year for a second-round pick and change. They stole Rosen, and even if he doesn't pan out, you didn't mortgage your first-round pick on a player that might not work out. And then they can go get a Tua next year.
All right, Steve.
I would agree. I don't want to repeat what he said, but that's exactly my thought process. They didn't pay a lot to get Rosen, and I'm interested to see Rosen in a different environment. I don't know if it just was a bad environment down there for him. If the kid's no good, it's good. We're going to find out pretty quickly. But if he flourishes and does well in the Miami scheme, that's the deal. That's the deal of the draft right there. To give up a second-round pick, a late second round, and a fifth rounder in 2020 for a first-round draft pick quarterback. Let's see what he can do in a different environment. Let's see if it was the environment that made him bad, or if he's just bad. We'll find out.
I'm hoping he's
but
awesome.
Because of Rosen, I'd say
Keim gets fired. I said I hope Rosen's awesome, just so Keim gets fired, because he deserves to be.
Yeah.
All right, next up.
I give him an A-. I think they drafted their needs, and they got Rosen.
All right.
But
all right, Minnesota Vikings obviously needed to fix their offensive line. I started with Garrett Bradbury at number 18, who could play center or guard. They picked up another interior blocker in Drew Samaya of Oklahoma. That'll tell you how good Kyler Murray's offensive line was, Anthony. I think they all got drafted in the first 150 picks of the NFL draft. They want to be more run-oriented. So the choices on the second and third day made sense to me. You had Irv Smith, who I think is a great pick. They picked up Alexander Mattson of Boise State, who I think is a nice backup for Dalvin Cook. It kind of blew my mind that they didn't go try to get one of his defensive linemen, but I'd give the Minnesota Vikings a solid B, Anthony.
Yeah, they had a quality draft. They needed an offensive lineman, and they got probably the best interior offensive lineman on the board in Garrett Bradbury. The Irv Smith pick, they have a tight end in Kyle Rudolph already. I don't think it was an immediate need, but the NFL, they do we see more and more teams put 2 tight ends on the field, especially 2 pass-catching tight ends. So I think that works, what they're trying to do. They definitely needed an Alexander Madison at running back because behind Dalvin Cook, who had injury issues early in his career, they had nothing after losing Latavius Murray. I think he'll be an impact player early, and he'll get some touches out of Dalvin Cook. I would have liked to see the Vikings bring in a quality wide receiver. Kirk Cousins has Diggs and Thielen, but behind them, there's nothing at receiver. And I think that's where the Vikings missed out because this was a really deep wide receiver draft. And they took Dylan Mitchell at 239. And that's not cutting it.
Steve, Minnesota Vikings, give it a grade.
Well, they had a purpose here, and I think they met it. They needed to shore up their offensive line. And they did that. They got a solid tight end, Smith and Bradbury. Drew Smalia, again, working on it. In the middle rounds, they went for a little bit of defense there with Smith and Watts and Epps. And then they went back into their offensive line again by taking Elon tackle Ouda. And so I think they drafted with a purpose, probably as good as anybody I saw. But their offensive line was their immediate need, and I think they addressed that. Then they went to shore up their defense a little bit. The running back, they needed some support there. So I think they had a purpose going into this draft, and they probably did a good job of meeting their needs as well as anybody. I'd give them a B+.
All right, next up we get the New England Patriots, who surprised some people by using their number 32 pick on Arizona State wide receiver N'Keal Harry. In the second round, they had a rare trade up instead of down, got versatile cornerback Joejuan Williams, who could be an outside cornerback or a safety. Michigan's Chase Winovich, I think, is a great pick. He can play standing up or if he's hand down. Bryant Cowart, who was a kid that was a stud coming out of high school, just never really worked out. Maybe Belichick can work his magic there. They did get a quarterback, an Auburn quarterback, Jarrett Steedham. I think he's really inconsistent, so I don't think that's the answer if Tom Brady leaves. And then they picked up 2 offensive linemen, Yondi Kajust and another guy who I can't pronounce his name. I'm not even going to try to. I would give this a B-. Anthony?
How about Froholt?
Yeah, whatever. I just didn't want to say his first name.
Aldi Froholt from Sweden.
Froholt. I don't know. Anthony, go ahead.
I think Bill Belichick came into this draft and into the offseason wanting to put more athletic ability around Tom Brady, more playmakers, because we see Tom Brady's arm, which was never a deep throw arm. We're seeing more and more dink and dunk out of Tom Brady now. So you need the playmakers around him, a little bit more speed. I was surprised that they took Damian Harris to add to their backfield, but their backfield is full of players with injury concerns, so then I get the pick. Patriots had a lot of picks. I think they drafted okay. I would give them a B. It's typical Patriots draft. They'll find their players out of it and be fine.
All right, Steve?
2 things. One is, I know you made some comment, Mike, that Belichick's never done well when he's taking a wide receiver in the first round.
That was Anthony last show.
Anthony, you said that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's questionable whether he has success with Harry or not. I was kind of surprised they didn't try and get some kind of tight end in there. They didn't draft any tight ends at all to look to at least fill some kind of role. You're never going to replace Gronkowski. There's no doubt about that. But they didn't even make an attempt to bring a tight end in. Maybe they just thought, we can't replace Gronkowski. We'll get that through free agency or somebody that wants to come and play and get a Super Bowl ring. But, I go B just because the history that Anthony talks about with Harry and with Belichick, just between him and any wide receiver pick, and not having a lot of success with it. So I'll go B.
All right, next up we got the New Orleans Saints, who I love the second round pick of Eric McCoy. I think that's a great pick. They got great value on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm not a huge fan if somebody's picking him in the first 2 rounds, and to get him at number 105, I think is a good pick. So I think those are 2 good picks. The rest of their draft, they just got some guys to me. I would say C+, Anthony.
Yeah, I can't disagree there.
All right, Steve.
Can't disagree.
Oh, good. That gets to the New York Giants. The New York Giants, on the other hand.
No, wait. Before we get to the Giants, I have to quote somebody. And I heard this on a podcast show that I was listening to Saturday, trying to get smart about this. And let's see who knows who said this. If orange is the new black, then the Giants are the new Browns.
Sounds like something I would say, Steve.
There you go. I was listening to your show.
Well, thanks for listening. But yeah,
that means now he's stalking you. Let's see.
But it's true.
Well, I'll tell you what.
It's true.
They picked Daniel Jones, a pick they could have had at 17, and they picked him at 6. They picked Dexter Lawrence, and he's an all right player, but he's not worth the 17th pick. DeAndre Baker, first round. I mean,
their bigger need was a safety.
Plus, if you're going to take a corner, your bigger need would be to take one better than DeAndre Baker. Actually, out of their entire draft, I think it's arguable their best value pick was Julian Love at number 108, who has great instincts to play the nickel. I will give the Giants a freaking G. I don't even think they're good enough to get an F, Anthony.
Yeah, I would probably give them a C-, D+.
Oh, come on. They
picked
a crap quarterback.
They reached everywhere. I'll give Daniel, they picked him early, but if he's a decent player in this league, with the way we see hits and misses at quarterback, we won't know this for a while, but I think the jury is still out on Daniel Jones.
All right. If you're the quarterback and you're picked number 6, Steve, I'll let you grade him. If I'm picking a quarterback at number 6 in the first round, if I don't win a Super Bowl with him, he's a bust.
I would agree.
Anthony?
Although it's hard to win a Super Bowl. There's a lot of 6th-round quarterbacks that end up being great quarterbacks that never won a Super Bowl. I can't name one, so don't ask me to. But
well, all I'm saying is this. When I pick a Super Bowl or pick a quarterback with the 6th pick, he better win a Super Bowl because that's what he's supposed to do, being picked that high. Do you agree, Anthony?
Well,
I do. Yeah, I do. There's only one Super Bowl winner a year, so you're telling me every quarterback that hasn't won a Super Bowl is a bust?
No, what I'm telling you is this. Every quarterback picked in the top 10 or the top 10, that's what you're brought to do. You're supposed to be the franchise quarterback that wins a Super Bowl. So, actually, I'll go this far. How about this? If Andrew Luck is the number 1 pick in the draft, never wins the Colts a Super Bowl, it was a bust.
Well, I don't know if that's true.
Dude, you have to win the Super Bowl. If you're a quarterback drafted in the top 6.
I think the Colts will win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, okay.
I think they will.
Oh, jeez. Why, has Rex Grossman got a son that's going to come take an underdeveloped Bears team to the Super Bowl and play the Colts?
Rex Grossman.
Hang on. I think this about Daniel Jones. At number 6, you should be, if you come in at number 6, you should be able to step onto the starting field as a starting quarterback right away. Not necessarily you're going to, but if you're going to invest in a number 6 quarterback, that quarterback should be able to start.
Yeah.
Like Kyler Murray's going to start. Andrew Luck started. Peyton Manning started. Guys like that came in at that high ranking of quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield should have started, but idiot coaches kept him from starting.
Yeah, because basically when you pick a guy that high, the interest is so high from the fans that you almost have to play him right away. And I think the Giants have just made sure that their next couple seasons are going to be atrocious.
He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL for 2 or 3 years. And to waste the number 6 pick on that when they have other pressing needs, I mean, they had a tremendous opportunity to show up. Who were the defensive players that were available? Wasn't Allen
everybody.
Available?
They had freaking Josh Allen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at that and you say, okay, we can get Darnell Jones with the 3rd pick at worst case. They had 3 first-round picks, and I don't think they did much with any of them. And they drafted dismally. I would go D plus C minus on this at best. At best.
I'm giving him a
Because
G.
Daniel Jones cannot step in and start.
All right,
And
next
number
up.
6,
And
you gotta be able
also,
to do that.
we had Michael Waddell, who tried to give me crap on Twitter, too, because, David Cutcliffe coaches them. And then I just, made the comment that, David Cutcliffe was also the quarterback for Heath Schuler, and he was a flaming waste of space when he got to the NFL. The New York Giants clearly wanted to fix their defense. And they took Quinnen Williams, which I think is a can't-miss kid. They also followed up at number 68 with Florida pass rusher.
Wait, the New York Giants? Who are you talking about?
The Jets. Now, we already talked about the Giants.
You said Giants. Giants.
Yeah, so you
That's
know what
okay.
I'm talking about. The Jets. Jaquil Polite. Let's see.
Sorry,
let's see. They took Chuma Duga also, which I just wanted to see if I could say his name. It really didn't matter to me. I think when you look at this, what they did with Polite and Williams, I would give them a B minus, Anthony.
Yeah, I don't think it was the best draft in the world. I think that they could have done a little bit better, especially in the mid-rounds, but they did a good job in free agency this offseason, and we're going to see an improved team in 2019.
All right, Steve?
I think getting Quinnen Williams makes their draft, basically everything that was kind of just, jelly on top of the toast. I agree with Anthony. He had nothing spectacular here other than Quinnen Williams, and I guess he did do some work for agency, so I would give him a B minus. But all on the strength of getting Quinnen Williams. I think he's going to be a dominant player.
Oakland Raiders, Clelin Ferrell at number 4. Bad pick, but a very good player. He will turn out to be a very good player. I just don't think the value was there. They got Josh Jacobs, which I think was a great pick. They got safety Jonathan Abram, who I think is a good player, but no value there. When I look at this, they got players. Hunter Renfrow, I think, is a great pick. I think he can be a weapon in the slot. I would give them a C+. I think the players they got, if this makes sense, Anthony, are better than C+ players. I just don't think they got the best value they could have on most of these guys.
Yeah, it's all about where they drafted them to me, and they reached a little bit, but I think I said it on one of the shows over the weekend that just like I said about Miami earlier, actually, is you don't want to miss. When you're a team that's been bad for a while and you're accustomed to taking a big boom or bust player, and they usually bust, then you probably should rethink the way you do things and take a safe bet. Whether or not he'll ever be a Hall of Famer, I doubt Ferrell will ever be a Hall of Famer, but can he be a 10, 12-sack player and play in Oakland for 8 to 10 years? Yes, and I think it's a win for them.
All right, Steve.
Everything I've read about this Clelin Ferrell guy, it was a good pick.
But he's not worth the 4th pick in the draft.
They say he's the second best pass rusher, but he's very one-dimensional. Like, that's all he can do.
My thing is this. I think a value pick for him is getting him after 15 or 16.
Maybe with the 24th pick or something like that, if he's still around. We may not have been around that way.
He probably wouldn't have been around then, but I'd say 15 to 20 is probably where he should have went. And I just think you had a guy like Josh Allen there. Hard to pass on a Josh Allen. But this is the thing with what Anthony said. The bigger risk is Josh Allen. Clelin Ferrell is going to be what Clelin Ferrell is, which is what Anthony said he would be, I think.
Yeah.
But all right.
I'd say B on the Raiders. They seem to be all over the board drafting. I mean, they seem to have so many holes to plug. They were drafting all over the board.
Well, it's because they have so many
holes to
plug.
A lot of defensive backs. With Abram, Mullen, and Johnson. So we'll see. I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in John Gruden. I'm not a John Gruden fan.
Neither am I. I'm a Mayock guy. I don't like Gruden.
No.
Yeah, I don't like Gruden, so I'm kind of biased a little bit toward that. But they seem to have been all over the board drafting. They didn't seem to have a purpose. They just we'll take the best player available. So B, based on Ferrell. I think Ferrell's a good pick, but you're right. It's probably a waste at number 4.
All right, next up, we get the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles picked up Andre Dillard. I think it's not a bad move. I think it's not a great value for Dillard, but the good thing about Dillard is he'll get to sit for at least a year behind Jason Peters, and I think he's a guy that's going to take a year or two to develop. Then they picked up Miles Sanders of Penn State, who I think is a good pick. Outside of that, though, I don't see a lot here. With the Eagles, I'd go C+, B-. Anthony?
I think the Eagles had a nice draft early. I like the offensive linemen. They protected themselves with Lane Johnson and Jason Peters, both aging and with injury issues.
They needed to address cornerback, though, and they didn't.
Yeah, and they put more weapons around Carson Wentz, and I don't think weapons is necessarily what they needed because they played well and they were explosive already. The Eagles kind of did what the Rams did. They took luxury when they had needs.
All right. Let's move on to Mr. Risley.
From what I read, Miles Sanders is actually considered to be maybe the second or third best back.
Oh, I like Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is a good football player.
Yeah, and they think he can have an immediate impact on that. Dillard, they need to protect Wentz. Wentz is injury prone, and they can need to protect him. They got an aging Peters got an aging lineman getting ready to go out, so it's a good. They maybe have filled that void if they can develop Dillard. Other than that, it doesn't seem like they did much. Like Anthony said, it's kind of like we'll just take some players and bolster up our depth chart and go from there. So I would say, based on Miles Sanders at number 53, getting him there, I'd go B.
All right, next up, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, who jumped up to get Devin Bush, who's definitely in need. I'm not a huge fan of Bush, but I do believe Bush fits Pittsburgh's defense and the way they play defense, so I think that's a really good pick. They got Deontay Johnson. Who else did they get? Benny Snell, who I think was a great pickup. Justin Lane as the big outside corner that I think they needed. I would give the Steelers a B. I think they had a solid draft here, Anthony.
Yeah, I love what the Steelers did going up and getting that linebacker because they knew after the two Devons there was a big fall off. And that was one of their biggest needs since losing Shazier. I know the Steelers added a wide receiver and a running back, Benny Snell, and I'm drawing a blank at the receiver. They lost who some think are top 5 players at running back and receiver this offseason, so I understand trying to replenish that. Steelers had a pretty strong draft, all things considered.
All right. Yeah, the receiver was Donnelly. Was it Dante Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson. Yeah. I already said that.
Deontay Johnson, yeah.
Steve, what do you think of the Steelers?
Based on Bush and Johnson and Lane, I'd say an A-. I think they drafted well.
All right, next up, the San Francisco 49ers. And this is something that really gets me. I saw where the 49ers were ranked on a post-draft thing at number 30, Anthony. And I think that's nuts because that's another team, if I could get some big odds on, I think I'd bet to win their division. That's if Garoppolo can stay healthy. They got Deebo Samuel, who I think was a great pickup. Bosa's a great pickup. They had a Jalen Hurd at number 67, who I think is a guy that could end up playing as a second tight end opposite of Kittle. They got All-American Utah punter Mitch Wishnowski. What's a stupid name? So I would give the 49ers on this draft, actually, I would go B+, A-. I really like the Deebo Samuel pick. Love Bosa. I think Hurd's going to be a guy that's going to fit what Shanahan wants to do. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you there. They brought in Hurd and Samuel, two solid wide receivers, to a wide receiver depth chart that has a lot of question marks. They have a lot of wide receiver 2s, 3s, and 4s, but they don't have that number 1. And maybe Deebo Samuel can develop into that. Bosa's the pick that I love. Bosa is going to immediately help that defense. They brought in Quan Alexander and other players, but Bosa is a day 1, week 1 difference maker in a tough division. I think the 49ers will be in a run for a wild card spot or even for that division title when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think they can win the division. Steve, what do you think about the Niners draft?
I like it a lot. I mean, I think they drafted well. I mean, Bosa is oft considered the best player in the draft. And, I just really go back to questioning the Cardinals, but keeping Rosen and getting Bosa. But they chose not to. So that was San Francisco's profit. I think the 49ers hinge a lot on Garoppolo. If he can come back healthy and his knee's solid and he's good, then I think they put a lot of people in place here. Deebo Samuel, I watched some film on him. That guy should probably be a tight end. I mean, he's big.
Yeah,
but he's got foot speed. He can run, I know. But you put him at tight end, teach him to block a little bit.
Well, they've already got George Kittle, who arguably, if Gronk's retired, is the best tight end, or one of the two or three best tight ends in the NFL.
All right, well, then you put him. Then you leave him out there. Then you've
right.
got a big monster wide receiver that's going to be hard for a small cornerback to bring down. So I think they drafted well. I'd go A- for the 49ers. I like it, and I agree with you. Whether they're going to get after the Rams this year, I think they'll eventually get after him, but I think they're definitely not for a wild card spot this year if Garoppolo stays healthy.
All right, next up we get the Seattle Seahawks, who they got Ben Burr-Kirven. I'm telling you, that guy's going to be a starter. But overall, when I look at this, DK Metcalf, I think they picked him in a spot where it's worth picking DK Metcalf, Anthony. I think the Collier pick is nuts. I'm not a huge fan here. I'd say C+.
Yeah, nobody expected DK Metcalf to be there when they got him, and that they made that pick on the wake of hearing that Doug Baldwin may never play football again. A 30-year-old wide receiver that's been there for a long time, and they already had a wide receiver need going into the draft, and then you hear the Baldwin news, and Seattle brought in another wide receiver, and the name is escaping me. So I like what they did. I think the Seattle Seahawks had a lot more needs for a team that made the playoffs last year than you would think, and I think they did a quality job filling them. I think the biggest question is DK Metcalf, what he's expected to be, or is he going to be a bust?
All right. We'll see. I think now, though, if he's a bust, it's not as big a deal because you're getting him in, the third round, into the second, start of the third round. So it'll still suck, but it's not as bad as if you'd have picked him in the first round. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Steve, we'll start with you. Devin White, taken 5th. I think that is a guy that you have to take a shot on. I'm not completely sold on him, but I'm not completely sold on anybody. They took Sean Bunting in the second round, quarterback Jamal Dean. I think this is a solid draft. Nothing that's that great to me. I'd say B-.
I had him at a C+. Yeah, I agree. I nothing in here. Devin White, number 5 pick all overall. Again, man, I don't know if that's a 5 pick or not. Bunting, looking down, they went defense a lot with safeties and Mike Edwards. So they kind of drafted all over the map too. But I'd say C+.
Anthony?
Yeah, same here. Outside of their first 2 picks, I think they reached a lot, and I'm not in love with what they did, although I do like Devin White, and I think he's going to be an impact player for them.
All right, next up, the Tennessee Titans. They took Jeffrey Simmons, or Simons, whatever. But he's a guy we're not going to know much about to the end of the season. But I think they got a nice steal with A.J. Brown. And I think he could be this draft's Juju Schuster-Smith, or Smith-Schuster, whatever the hell his name is. I don't like the Steelers anyway, so why am I even talking about a Steeler? They got guard Nate Davis at number 82. I think that the Titans actually drafted pretty well here. I'd call them a B+, Anthony.
Yeah, I like their draft. No issue there. They needed another wide receiver. They brought in a defensive tackle in Simmons. My question is not of the draft. It's who the hell is going to be their quarterback. Otherwise, you're wasting A.J. Brown.
All right. Steve?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't want to add a lot more, too, because we're getting into a time
Washington.
Here, but,
we're going to go to Washington. You said you didn't want to add a lot more to it. So, Steve, I'll let you start with Washington. They took Dwayne Haskins. Montez Sweat, Terry McLaurin, who's a speedy wide receiver who, of course, played last year with Haskins. Bryce Love. I mean, Bryce Love's a dude that, if he's healthy, he could be a stud. So when you look at this, what do you think, Steve?
I love their draft. I think they drafted their needs. And, to get Dwayne Haskins, I think he's going to be a surprise quarterback of all the quarterbacks coming out.
He's not.
I just think that kid can play.
He can.
Well, that's just my opinion. I mean,
you're
I'm
wrong.
not as smart as you
Go
are.
ahead.
I get that.
Anthony, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
bit?
Because Steve's not making any sense. Go ahead, Steve.
Montez Sweat was a guy I wanted the Colts to get a hold of. He's got some health issues, allegedly still, but there's question about all that. McLaurin, Bryce Love. I think they took an IU player, offensive guard Wes Martin. They're great. They took an IU player. So what the heck? No, I thought they had a really good draft. I think Haskins was a get.
Okay. He wasn't. What do you think, Anthony?
He's a good quarterback.
I think the Redskins had one of the best drafts of all the teams, and whether Haskins pans out or not, they didn't give up the farm to go get him. They let Haskins come to them. They got the pass rusher. The names they got Sweat, right?
Yeah, Montez Sweat.
Yeah, they got Sweat.
Another great value there. They addressed wide receiver with Harmon. I think the Redskins potentially got a lot better from this draft. It's just now, can they make it all come together on a field with Jay Gruden?
And the answer to that will be no. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. I want to remind people, and Anthony, you'll want to listen in, because tomorrow we have a special guest from the American Cornhole Organization, President Frank Gears. This may be the first president we've had on the show, Steve.
Wasn't Oliver Luck president of the XFL?
I think he's like the GM. I don't know. We'll have to look it up. But maybe we'll play Hail to the Chief before we introduce him. That'd be cool. But, all right, I want to remind everybody you can find Anthony Cervino on thegruelingtruth.com. Also, FF Faceoff. You put in FF Faceoff in a Google search, you'll find Anthony. That's how important Anthony is. Steve Risley, well, he's got a ring. And if you want to follow him, you can go to @SRisley34. You can follow The Grueling Truth @Grueling Truth. Make sure you come back in about a half hour for me and Bobby Sheridan with the Sheridan Report. And then tonight, somewhere around 8 or 9 o'clock, we will have the Cincinnati Bengals post-draft show. So I guess I'm not done talking about this stuff yet. At 11 o'clock tonight, we will have on the Inside Boxing Daily Show Daniel Cisneros, who wrote the best-selling book Matt Tales, who will be on to kick off our week leading up to the big fight between Canelo Alvarez and Danny Jacobs. And then tomorrow, Frank Gears, the American Cornhole Organization president, will be on with us at noon tomorrow to talk cornhole. All right, Stevie, we're going to wrap it up. Tomorrow we get to talk cornhole, so you need to brush it up and go look up some cornhole stuff. All right, guys, remember you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, Zeno Live Radio, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Steve Risley, Anthony Cervino, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.